Organizing a trip to Ecuador? I have 23.5 things you need to know before you visit. As someone who has lived here over 10 years and has gathered the advice and knowledge of travelers and natives alike, I compiled these tips about money, transportation, safety, communication, and food in order to help you have the best experience in Ecuador. Let's start with something that you need no matter where you go, and that's money. Ecuador is very much a physical cash-based country, so I always recommend having cash on hand. Actual physical bills, you know? But one question I do get quite frequently is how much money would be ideal to carry around at any given time? I have 3 different answers for this question. $20 per person is fine if your intention is to walk around, take buses, enjoy some of the food that Ecuador has to offer, and maybe enter a cheap touristic site or two. $50 is slightly premium, but allows you the choice of taking a taxi or Uber and gives you some leeway to buy a cheap souvenir. $100 is the deluxe amount, since you could easily do all the things that were mentioned prior, unless you decide to buy a $100 souvenir. Now you could of course carry double of any of these values, but my third tip is to avoid carrying around too much cash at any given time, because it's just not safe. Crime is not a guaranteed thing, but you don't do yourself any favors by carrying around excessive amounts of cash. Now, as for what specific bills to carry while you're here, I highly recommend carrying around $5 bills because they're the bills that will cause you the least amount of problems. And what I mean by that is that sometimes people don't have change because the things that they sell are so cheap. And speaking of change, another tip that I have is to carry around at least $3 to $5 of pocket change. Ideally, you want either 3 to 5 $1 coins or a mix of $1 coins, 50-cent coins, and 25-cent coins. This is important because change can be scarce, and also because sometimes outside of public bathrooms, there will be a person who will charge you to use the bathroom, even more so if you have to use toilet paper. And speaking of toilet paper, a bonus tip I'll give you is that if you're in a stall that has a little trash bin in it, don't flush the toilet paper down that toilet. I know someone who did that and they ended up clogging the toilet. And trust me, you don't want to go through that. Now, since we have mentioned buses and taxis, let's talk a little bit about transportation. And I do have a very important tip in regards to that. First though, to answer the question of whether you should take a bus or a taxi, the simplified answer is that if you want to get someplace cheap, under $1, with a tiny bit of added risk, then take a bus. On the other hand, if you don't mind paying a little bit more, like maybe $3 to $5 and up for more extreme distances, but you get the bonus of a little bit more safety, then take a taxi. But I think that a more important tip in regards to bus or taxi use is to know which bus or taxi to take. My tip is that if you're going to take a bus, then make sure to ask the staff at the place that you're at which bus or buses will take you to your destination. As for a taxi, I also recommend that you ask the staff to call one in for you. And don't get me wrong, there are taxis around almost every corner of every city in Ecuador, but it's always better to have the staff call one in for you just to be safe. And if you want to have more autonomy, I recommend that you ask the staff to suggest an Uber-like transportation app. Not every city has Uber, so it's good to ask a local which transportation app is commonly used in that city so that you can use it as well. But going back to buses, we should talk about inner-city bus travel. One tip I have here is to definitely use the bathroom before you even get on the bus. The majority of the time, the bathroom in the buses is locked. And sometimes buses will only make 1, sometimes 2, if it's a longer trip, stops, and you definitely don't want to be holding it in for that long. Especially for those long 4 to 8 hour trips. After you've resolved the bathroom problem and you're actually on the bus, my next tip is to not let anyone handle your luggage. Remember, Bus staff usually won't offer to disinfect or put your luggage in the upper compartments. They only handle the luggage in the lower compartments. Anyone asking to touch your luggage in any way, shape, or form is probably a thief. So either kindly decline or completely ignore their offer to supposedly help you with your luggage. This also applies for buses in the city. So make sure you have your hands and eyes on the things you're carrying at all times. Speaking of which, while we're still on transportation, and while it's not exactly transportation, walking is a way of getting around. So my tip is, if you are walking around and carrying a backpack, then consider putting it in front of you instead of behind you. In large crowds, there have been people who have had stuff pulled out of their bags, so if you can see your bag at all times, it makes it impossible for anyone to reach into it. If you're still worried about your luggage, my next tip is to put a lock on the zippers so they can't be easily opened. This won't save your whole bag if it's taken, but it'll at least give you some peace of mind so that you can put it on your back and not have to be hyper-focused on it. If you'd like to check some locks out, and also some bags that are theft-proof, then I'll leave some links down in the description below. Another tip I have in regards to walking is to wait a second or two when crossing the street. That, or follow the rhythm of the locals when crossing. Driving can be very hectic here, and some people like to blow past red lights. So waiting an extra second or two can really save you from getting hurt. However, if you do get hurt, and not just due to reckless driving, but things can happen, you know? Ecuador does have free healthcare, but it's not as efficient as you might want it to be in a pinch. That's why my next tip is to get some travel insurance. And my top recommendation for travel insurance is SafetyWing. SafetyWing offers coverage for people all over the world with their Nomad insurance plan covering both your travel and medical needs. If you're not sure about needing insurance, then no problem. You can sign up for SafetyWing at any point during your journey abroad. And if you need more flexibility than that, you can also add on different benefits depending on what you know your trip is going to be like. For example, maybe you want to do some adventure sports. Then you can add that benefit on. Maybe you're not from the States and you want to go to the States at some point. Then you could add on that benefit as well. If you're coming to Ecuador, then I would highly recommend adding on the electronics theft add-on, because electronics are highly coveted by thieves here. So if you want to play it safe and are interested in SafetyWing, then I'll leave a link in the description of this video so you can check it out yourself. Now, as you probably noticed, when it comes to transportation, things can get very chaotic. But you could of course avoid all of this chaos by hiring a private driver. And Mr. Darwin Paredes is still the absolute MVP when it comes to private drivers. Not only does he know English, but Darwin is also always highly praised in the Ecuador Travel group on Facebook for his excellent service. If you'd like to hire him, make sure you let him know ahead of time. So I'll leave his WhatsApp number and Facebook page in the description of this video so that you can get in touch with him as soon as possible. So one thing you may have noticed with all this talk of transportation is the inevitability of communication. Ecuador is a primarily Spanish-speaking country, and Ecuadorians are very sociable once you get to know them, so I do recommend knowing or learning Spanish. But if that's not something that's immediately possible for you, then I do have some other tips that can help you out. One tip is to have a translation device ready. Your phone could actually be your best friend here, and Google Translate does have an app that works offline. But the problem is that it only works offline with text translations. The alternative, of course, is an offline translation device. But the reviews on the ones that I investigated are pretty hit or miss. I'll link the two that I found that weren't wallet breaking in the description below, as well as one that made my wallet weep, but that had very good reviews, so that you can check them out yourself. Since translation devices might be unreliable and learning the whole language might be too much, Another tip I have is to learn key words and phrases that will help you when you're here in Ecuador. Some of the ones I think you're going to use the most are as follows. Buenas. This is a very informal yet still somewhat polite way of saying good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Me gustaría esto. This is how you can specify that you would like a specific thing. And you can of course replace the word esto for the specific thing that you're asking about. ¿Cuánto cuesta? This is how you ask how much something costs. But you should be very clear as to the thing you're asking about by either holding it up or gesturing towards it. ¿Dónde está el baño? This is how you ask where the bathroom is, and of course you can replace el baño for whatever the thing you're looking for is. ¿Cómo llego a el restaurante? This is how you can ask how you can get to the restaurant, and of course you can replace el restaurante with the place that you're trying to get to. Muchas gracias. This is thank you very much, and you should always say it because it's never a bad thing to be polite. These are just some examples, of course, and I'll leave other useful sentences on screen now so that you can screenshot them. In more severe cases where you know you'll be doing a lot of interaction with Spanish speakers, I definitely recommend hiring an interpreter because there are some nuances in Spanish that might be hard to understand without one. If you happen to be visiting the Puerto Viejo Manta area and you'd like to hire some help, then send me an email and me and my Ecuadorian friends can help you out, like we did with Mark Horning, and trust me, he had a blast. Don't just take my word for it, this is what he had to say about the experience with us. And while with Mark, all of us did go out at night, another tip I have is to not go out too late in Ecuador. The general rule of thumb is that the later it is, the more fun the parties are, but also the more questionable your safety is when trying to get back home. I'd recommend only staying out until 12 o'clock, but hey, you do you. As for things to do when you go out, I don't recommend drinking since I don't drink myself, but I'm pretty sure everyone else here will. Drinking at parties, discotecas, and even out on the street is the norm in most cities here. Though I'd say it would definitely be more fun to do with a group of Ecuadorian friends, that's for sure. And if you do plan on winding up at a party or a discoteca, then I highly recommend that you learn how to dance, or if you already know dancing, then you're good, because Ecuadorians love dancing almost as much as they love soccer. But most of these activities are nighttime activities. And if you're like me and you don't drink and you can't dance, okay, more likely you just want to go out by yourself and you want to go out in the afternoon, then I highly recommend you go out and you try some Ecuadorian dishes. But a small tip within this tip, keep in mind that most Ecuadorian dishes can be found all around Ecuador. But regional dishes will always be better in the region they're from. If a coastal dish seemed disappointing when you tried it in the highlands, it's definitely better in the coast. And vice versa, if you try a highlands dish in the coast, it's definitely gonna be better in the highlands. Now, if you're unsure of what coastal foods to try, then in this video, me and my Ecuadorian friend Roddy take you on a tour of the best coastal street food in all of Ecuador. So definitely check it out next.